introduce some basic but important tips in Mosnter Hunter Wilds. If you're new to Mosnter Hunter Wilds, hands down, the single most important thing in this game is simply learning how your weapon works, as well as learning how the monsters work. Now, it's going to sound ridiculous because, well, frankly, that's the entire game. When you're starting out, I would, number one, pick a weapon that you want to learn. So I would say before you ever start playing, and honestly the game does prompt you to do this, just spend a good amount of time picking your weapon and finding something that just sounds like something you will vibe with. Every weapon is viable, trust me. You can use anything you want. However, some weapons are more complicated than others. And you, of course, have to be competent with said weapon. I would spend some time in the very beginning and learn 2 basic combos. That way when you get into combat, you can at least apply some combos and at least do something. Something that's like viable and actually a thing, that's not just spamming buttons. That way you're at least practicing something real, and later in the game you can add on to it as you can complicate the weapon with your own knowledge, if that makes sense. Just learn a few moves, a few basic sets. For example, what I chose to do is learn this Dragon Piercer combo, which is really very simple, but you can just use it in game. And again, having just at least 1 or 2 basic combos known at least gives you a start, and you can practice that freely in the practice range, the training area. It's hard to recommend people do a chore before they really get into the game, but honestly my main thing here is you're just trying to avoid getting into really bad habits, and again, just getting used to just spamming stuff and doing basically nothing. It's much better to just learn the foundational stuff and then build on that and get better later. It's something I wish I spent more time doing in Mosnter Hunter World. To get more information on your weapon, simply open your start menu, go to info, go to play guide, and then under here you will see weapon controls. And this will give you a pretty good explanation of kind of how your weapon works and all of the combos. As you can see, this is pretty darn intimidating. I mean, there are several pages of complicated combos and a ton of information that we see here. Make sure you are studying this and understand how your weapon works. That's all I can really say. It's much better to learn some of this stuff early on instead of learning bad habits that are harder to break down the line. If you keep that weird little kid's voice on your palico in Mosnter Hunter Wilds, you're a weirdo.
This is gonna be great!
Just kidding. If you want to do that, that's fine. But if you don't, go over to options, go all the way to audio, and then you can switch off the feline language or switch it on. Personally, I like it when they just meow. I have to admit, the palico has a few voice lines in the story, so you have to be ready for them to just meow through it instead of that. Options, feline language, talk like a cat, my friend. One setting that can make life a lot better in Mosnter Hunter Wilds is if you go under your camera settings, go on the second page here, we can find a setting called camera distance zoom, and basically this gives you some distance between the camera and your hunter. And so sometimes it can feel like we're really a little too close for comfort to ourselves there, and maximizing this, in my opinion, makes things so much better. I hope this helps. One really important thing to know in Mosnter Hunter Wilds is that you can sleep. You can actually change the time of day as well as like the certain event that's going on, which is super helpful for chasing certain materials, doing certain optional quests, and finding different things. There are some endemic life that only come out at night, and if you're going for some very specific things, again, they may only come out at a certain time. So to change it, you can actually go to the same place where you go to grill a meal, and directly below it is actually the rest option. And then you can choose a certain type of environment, so we can like choose the season kind of, and at what time. And so by doing so, we can make it so that we increase our chances of finding certain things. Now this does cost guild points, but it's not super expensive, and depending on what you're going for, it might be really worth it. And because I just did this, I'm actually going to go try and find a fish I've been tracking down. Did you know when you are in your tent little base camp that you can actually go all the way over here and launch quests from this menu? It took me a long time to realize that you can just launch quests right from here. This makes it easy because you can just go over here to change your equipment, eat a meal, and do everything to prep, and then just launch from the same menu. But if you look under a quest and then you use your right trigger, you can actually scroll through some information about the fight. On the third tab, you can get detailed information about the monster. That way, you can scroll through with your bumper button, and you can see what they're weak to, and you can find more information about the monster. Go under your quest, then you can use your right or left trigger to navigate these menus, go over to detailed menu, and then you can cycle that with the buttons, and you can find their weakness. That way, you can check your quest, check the weakness of a monster, go all the way back, change your equipment, change your stuff, prep up for the quest, and then launch. However, if you want to leave and talk to Alma, I don't blame you. If you just started playing Mosnter Hunter Wilds, you have your seikret, but you can't customize it yet, don't worry, that is normal. Seikret customization is unlocked after you fight the Dashagama in the story mode, and then you will get options to customize it further. Oh, I forgot I unlocked a new type of armor. Oh, yeah, baby. Arkveld looks sick. Okay, that's really cool. Sorry, I don't mean to flex. That is how you change it. So you'll just go to your far right tab under the appearance menu, Seikret Customization, and then you can change all kinds of stuff. You don't unlock it until a certain point in the story. You get the Seikret for several missions before you're able to fully customize it. So just hang in there. Mosnter Hunter Pro Tip. Set up a gathering set. Having armor to kill monsters is nice and all, but what about collecting berries? You may have noticed that there's a lot of skills in Mosnter Hunter that have to do with collecting. Well, it's not uncommon that players will actually set up an equipment loadout that is 100% dedicated to gathering. And that way you can go out into the world and go ahead and just gather. I like this. I like going on the little optional quests. I like finding endemic life. I like fishing. I like gathering stuff. So I like to have a set that's good for all of that stuff. First of all, we have the Balachi specs, which make it so that you can actually harvest Vespoid corpses, which may or may not be useful to you. A couple of skills that are really important are the Geologist skill, which allows you to get extra items while gathering stuff, which is pretty incredible. Botanist, which does the same thing, except for plants, of course. There is the Outdoorsman skill, which improves fishing, grilling, and transporting abilities, which again may or may not be useful depending on what you're doing. What's even more interesting is in Wilds you have what are called group skills, which basically give you an extra bonus if you have multiple items from the same group skill. And there are a few that are really helpful for gathering. Number one, this is Forager's Luck. As the name suggests, it makes you luckier when you're finding rare stuff. So increases the chance of finding rare gathering points. So that's really pretty helpful. Earlier I mentioned the Entomologist skill, which you get from the Balachi specs, which help you carve Vespoids, which then can be used to make the Vespoid armor, which is interesting because they have a group skill that increases the amount of honey that you gain from gathering points, which means if you have 3 of these pieces, you can collect honey at a higher rate. So with all of these things combined, you can create a pretty powerful gathering set. Now you're probably going to have to mix and match and figure out what you have the items for. Try to make sure you at least have Geologist and Botanist on there, and then some of this extra stuff is really great. Both of those group skills are really, really interesting and powerful, and there are dedicated gathering armor sets. So don't forget about that, and that's a really powerful skill to learn in Mosnter Hunter. Thank you so much for watching. These have been some very basic tips. I know these are going to be a little basic for some people who've already played Mosnter Hunter, but that's alright. Alright, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you found this helpful, and I will see you later. Gamers, like the video if you enjoyed it. Leave some comments if you have some more tips to add, and don't forget to subscribe for some more.